28, Day 1. Vulnerable. Open to attack, susceptible.
The egotist is vulnerable to slights and insults.
Bedlam. Confusion, uproar.
The winning team's dressing room was a scene of bedlam.
Cacophony. Discord, harsh sound, dissonance.
Electronic music is considered nothing more or less than cacophony by many.
Exploit. Profit by, utilize.
Advertisers spend large sums to exploit the lucrative teenage market.
Propinquity. Nearness in time or place.
Astronauts are alert to the propinquity of sudden accidents.
A white elephant. A costly and useless possession.
When he discovered the 30-volume encyclopedia, dated 1895, in his attic, he knew he had a white elephant on his hands.
A dangerous sport. Racing car drivers are vulnerable to dangers that other sportsmen seldom face. Drivers agree that controlling a car at top speeds on a winding course is a singularly awesome experience. There is the bedlam, caused by the roaring motors that move the car from a standing start to 100 miles an hour in 8 seconds. One is shaken by the cacophony of the brakes, larger than the wheels, and producing during the course of a 350-mile race, enough heat to warm an 8-room house through a hard winter. The driver needs to be on the alert to exploit any mistake by an opponent, and he must be constantly aware of the propinquity of sudden death. All of this makes car racing one of the most demanding games of all.
Week 28, Day 2. Disgruntled. Unhappy, displeased.
It is the prevalent mood for youngsters to be disgruntled with the world situation.
Infallible. Exempt from error, right.
An infallible sign of spring is the blooming of the crocus.
Panacea. Cure-all.
Many people hoped that the United Nations would be the panacea for the problems of our time.
Eradicate. Wipe out.
The criminal tried to eradicate all of the witnesses to the bizarre murder.
Impede. Interfere, block, hinder.
Nothing could impede the bigot from his vitriolic verbal attack.
Lock, stock, and barrel. Entirely, completely.
The company moved its operations to another state. Lock, stock, and barrel.
The mystery of creativity. In order to create, it is said that a man must be disgruntled. The creative individual is usually one who is dissatisfied with things as they are. He wants to bring something new into the world, to make it a different place. There is no infallible way to identify a potentially creative person. The speed up in the sciences has forced schools and industry to seek a panacea for the shortages that they face. The need to discover and develop the creative person has been the source of much study. The paramount objectives of the studies are to eradicate anything that will impede the discovery of creative talent, and to exploit this talent to the limit.
Week 28, Day 3. Sedate. Quiet, still, undisturbed, sober.
There is something absurd about a well-dressed, sedate man throwing snowballs.
Equanimity. Evenness of mind, composure.
The speaker lost his equanimity, and began to use invective when the audience started to laugh.
Compatible. Harmonious, well-matched.
The boy and girl discovered they had many compatible interests.
Serenity. Peaceful repose.
The serenity of the countryside was shattered by the explosion.
Revere. Honor, respect, admire.
There are not many people in this world whom one can revere.
A feather in one's cap. Something to be proud of.
If she could get the movie star's autograph, she knew it would be a feather in her cap.
The Dutch. The first impression one gets of Holland is that it is a calm, sedate, and simple land. The slow rhythm of life is even seen in the barges on the canals, and the bicycles on the roads. One gradually discovers this equanimity of daily existence is not in accord with the intrinsic nature of the Dutch. These people are moved by strong feelings that are not compatible with the serenity of the world around them. There is a conflict between the rigid, traditional social rules and the desire for liberty and independence, both of which the Dutch revere.
Week 28, Day 4. Irrational. Unreasonable, absurd.
We ought to expect some irrational behavior from a senile person.
Avarice. Greed, passion for riches.
Who is not vulnerable to some measure of avarice?
Insatiable. Cannot be satisfied.
The American consumer appears to have an insatiable need for new products.
Nadir. Lowest point.
He looked upon the last place finish of his team with equanimity. From this nadir the only place to go was up.
Moribund. Dying, at the point of death.
With the expansion of the supermarket, the small, local grocery store is in a moribund state.
Out on a limb. In a dangerous or exposed position.
He went out on a limb and predicted he would win the election by a wide margin.
Tulip fever. The tulip reached Holland in 1593 and was, at first, looked upon as a curiosity. There soon developed an irrational demand for new species. Specimens were sold at awesomely high prices. In their avarice, speculators bought and sold the same tulip 10 times in one day. The entire Dutch population suffered from the craze. There was an insatiable desire for each new color or shape. At one point a man purchased a house for 3 bulbs. Before long the inevitable crash came, and the demand for bulbs quickly reached its nadir. A $1,500 bulb could be bought for $1.50. With the moribund tulip market, came financial disaster to thousands of people.
Week 29, Day 1. Lithe. Graceful.
It was a pleasure to watch the lithe body of the ballet dancer as she performed the most difficult steps.
Obese. Very fat.
His insatiable hunger for sweets soon made him obese.
Adherent. Backer, supporter.
The disgruntled adherent switched his loyalty to the opposition party.
Bliss. Happiness, pleasure.
Oh, what bliss could be seen in the eyes of the ardent couple as they announced their engagement.
Pathetic. Sad, pitiful, distressing.
There is something pathetic about a great athlete who continues to compete long after he has been bereft of his talents.
On the spur of the moment. On impulse, without thinking.
On the spur of the moment he turned thumbs down on the new job.
A sport for everyone. Of the many highly popular sports in the United States, football must be rated around the top. This sport allows the speedy and lithe athlete to join with the slower and obese one in a team effort. The skills and strengths of many men are welded together so that one team may work as a unit to gain mastery over its opponent. The knowledgeable adherent of a team can follow action covering many parts of the playing field at the same time. He is in a state of bliss when his team executes a movement to perfection. However, there is no one more pathetic than the same fan when the opposition functions to equal perfection.
Week 29, Day 2. Exhort. Urge strongly, advise.
Doctors exhort obese individuals to go on diets.
Apathy. Lack of interest, unconcern.
The feeling of apathy was so prevalent during the election campaign that the candidates hardly bothered to make speeches.
Fracas. Noisy fight, brawl.
The fracas started when he besmirched my good name.
Inebriated. Drunk, intoxicated.
He was usually sedate, but when inebriated he became hostile.
Adversary. Opponent, enemy, foe.
My adversary became disgruntled because my arguments were so cogent.
A fly in the ointment. Some small thing that spoils or lessens the enjoyment.
He was offered a lucrative position with the firm, but the fly in the ointment was that he would have to work on Saturday and Sunday.
Rah, rah, rah. The spectators at a football game play more than a superficial role. A spirited cheer from the stands often gives the player on the field a reason to try even harder. Cheerleaders exhort the fans, who may be in a state of apathy because their team is losing, to spur on the team. In particularly close games between rivals of long standing, feelings begin to run high, and from time to time a fracas may break out in the stands. While the teams compete below, the fan who is a bit inebriated may seek out a personal adversary. On the whole, the enthusiasm of the spectators is usually constricted to cheering and shouting for their favorite teams.
Week 29, Day 3. Indolent. Lazy.
The indolent person goes to great lengths to eschew work.
Gusto. Enthusiasm, enjoyment, zest.
He began to eat the food served at the sumptuous feast with gusto.
Garrulous. Talkative, wordy.
She was usually so garrulous, we considered anything under a 5-minute speech as a cryptic remark.
Banal. Trivial, meaningless from overuse.
Men believe that women's conversation is filled with banal comments concerning clothing or food.
Platitude. Commonplace or trite saying.
During the most sultry days of summer, one often hears the platitude, is it hot enough for you?
To take French leave. To go away without permission.
The star player was fined $100 when he took French leave from the training camp.
The 23-inch football field. The football fan, who cannot attend a contest in person, may watch any number of games on television. This has the great advantage of permitting an indolent fan to sit in the comfort of his living room and watch two teams play in the most inclement weather. However, some of the spirit, the gusto, is missing when one watches a game on a small screen, away from the actual scene of the contest. Also, the viewer is constantly exposed to a garrulous group of announcers who continue to chatter in an endless way throughout the afternoon. Should the game be a dull one, the announcers discuss the most banal bits of information. Even in the poorest game, there is constant chatter involving one platitude after another about the laudable performances of each and every player.
Week 29, Day 4. Pique. Fit of resentment.
He showed his pique by slamming the door.
Dilettante. One who has great interest, but little knowledge.
The dilettante will scoff at those who admit that they know very little about modern art.
Atypical. Nonconforming.
It is the atypical fisherman, who does not embellish the story about the fish that got away.
Nondescript. Undistinguished, difficult to describe.
The detective had little to go on, because of the nondescript nature of the criminal.
Wane. Decrease, decline.
Many virulent diseases are now on the wane.
In the arms of Morpheus. Asleep.
The day's activities were so enervating, he was soon in the arms of Morpheus.
What's on? One day each week is set aside for college football, and another for the professional brand. Most fans enjoy both varieties. Nothing can put an avid viewer into a pique more quickly than missing an important contest. It is the dilettante who eschews the amateur variety and watches only the professional games. The atypical fan will watch only his home team play. However, enthusiasts will continue to view the most nondescript contests involving teams that have no connection with their own town or school. Some intrepid fans have been known to watch high school games when that was all that was offered. Public interest in football grows each year, while interest in other sports may be on the wane.
Week 30, Day 1. Extinct. No longer existing.
The dinosaur is an extinct species.
Idyllic. Simple, peaceful.
City dwellers often yearn for the idyllic life in the country.
Galvanize. Excite or arouse to activity.
A dictator will use any pretext to galvanize his people into aggressive actions.
Encumbrance. Burden, handicap, load.
It is amazing how lithe football players can be, despite the encumbrance of the safety features of their uniforms.
Gaudy. Showy, flashy.
Today, the trend is to more and more gaudy dress.
40 winks. A short nap.
During the night before the big test, he studied continuously, catching 40 winks now and then.
In days gone by. The man, who best described the now extinct life aboard a steamer on the Mississippi River, is Mark Twain. Having actually worked aboard the river boats, his writing captures the tranquil or turbulent events of those days. In his book about life on the Mississippi, Twain recalls the idyllic times, when man was not in such a great rush to get from one place to another. One chapter deals with the races conducted between the swiftest of the boats. When a race was set, the excitement would galvanize activity along the river. Politics and the weather were forgotten, and people talked with gusto only of the coming race. The two steamers stripped and got ready, every encumbrance that might slow the passage was removed. Captains went to extremes to lighten their boats. Twain writes of one captain, who scraped the paint from the gaudy figure that hung between the chimneys of his steamer.
Week 30, Day 2. Condescend. Stoop, lower oneself.
He had such disdain for us, he would not condescend to speak before our group.
Candor. Frankness, honesty.
When we cannot speak with candor, we utilize euphemisms.
Mortify. Embarrass, humiliate.
Good sportsmanship requires that one not mortify a defeated adversary.
Jocose. Humorous, merry.
It is difficult to be jocose in the presence of so many doleful people.
Malign. Abuse, slander.
It is most common to malign the wealthy for their avarice.
From pillar to post. From one place to another.
The company was so large and spread out, he was sent from pillar to post, before he found the proper official.
The John J. Roe. Mark Twain's boat was so slow no other steamer would condescend to race with it. With the utmost candor, Twain comments that his boat moved at such a pathetic pace, they used to forget in what year it was they left port. Nothing would mortify Twain more than the fact that ferryboats, waiting to cross the river, would lose valuable trips, because their passengers grew senile, and died waiting for his boat, the John J. Roe, to pass. Mark Twain wrote in a jocose manner about the races his steamer had with islands and rafts. With quiet humor he continued to malign the riverboat, but his book is replete with love for this sort of life.
Week 30, Day 3. Omnipotent. Almighty, unlimited in power or authority.
We would scoff at anyone calling himself omnipotent.
Zenith. Summit, top, prime.
Under the aegis of an adroit master, he reached the zenith of his career.
Fledgling. Little known, newly developed.
The fledgling poet lived a frugal life.
Peremptory. Absolute, compulsory, binding.
No one had the temerity to disobey the officer's peremptory order.
Precedent. Custom, model.
There is no precedent for voting when there is no quorum.
In the lap of the gods. Out of one's own hands.
I handed in my application for the job, and now it is in the lap of the gods.
The riverboat pilot. The riverboat pilot was a man considered omnipotent by all. Mark Twain once held that high position. He writes that he felt at the zenith of his life at that time. Starting out as a fledgling pilot's apprentice, he could not abjure dreams of the time he would become, the only unfettered and entirely independent human being that lived in the earth. Kings, parliaments, and newspaper editors, Twain comments, are hampered and restricted. The river pilot issued peremptory commands as absolute monarch. The captain was powerless to interfere. Even though the pilot was much younger than the captain, and the steamer seemed to be in imminent danger, the older man was helpless. The captain had to behave impeccably, for any criticism of the pilot would establish a pernicious precedent that would have undermined the pilot's limitless authority.
Week 30, Day 4. Wheedle. Coax, persuade, cajole.
The child tried to wheedle from her mother the place where the cookies had been cached.
Rustic. Countrified, unpolished.
The rustic life is supposed to be a tranquil one.
Jubilant. Joyful, in high spirits.
We were jubilant when our indolent cousin got a job.
Decorum. Politeness, correct behavior.
Repress your uncouth manners and act with decorum at the party.
Charlatan. Pretender, fraud.
They could discern that the faith healer was a charlatan.
Achilles' heel. Weak spot.
He wanted to lead an ascetic life, but his obsession with liquor was his Achilles' heel.
The double cross. Many incidents that took place aboard his ship are retold by Twain. One has to do with a wealthy cattle man who was approached by 3 gamblers. The cattle farmer had let it be known that he had a great deal of money, and the gamblers were trying to wheedle him into a card game. He protested that he knew nothing about cards. His rustic appearance confirmed that fact. On the last night before landing, the 3 gamblers got him drunk. When the first hand was dealt, a jubilant expression came over his face. The betting became furious. All of the proper decorum was put aside, and $10,000 soon lay on the table. With the last wager, one of the gamblers showed a hand of 4 kings. His partner was to have dealt the sucker a hand of 4 queens. At this point the victim, the charlatan, removed the veneer of respectability, and showed a hand of 4 aces. One of the 3 professional gamblers was a clandestine confederate of the rich cattle farmer. They had been planning this duplicity for many weeks.